Okay, in the first two videos talking about our housing crisis and what we have to do, I tried to identify the problem. And that was the idea that we no longer are a local market, we've become an international market. And once you become an international market, all of your pricing loses control. Usually a real estate market builds homes for the incomes of people in the community. In Hawaii, we're building homes for what a foreigner can pay, what a mainland guy can pay. We're not building for our local community. So if we accept that, then the solution becomes a little different. Also, I talked in the second video about the fact that we have people that are buying because they look at the value and the appreciation and the market. And really, we buy real estate to lock in a monthly payment. And I gave the example of how if you bought a home in the 60s, I think you paid something like $29,000 in interest to buy that home. And if you compared it to someone who bought the home back then, it cost $29,000 up until today. If you rented that same house, you would have spent $3 million in rent. So you saved money by buying. That's the reason you buy real estate. Then I also explained that it's important that we not forget about the people who rent. And they also have to be owners or benefit from locking in the monthly payment so they can create wealth over time. So the solution involves the market, the solution involves owners, the solution involves renters, and being able to control that market. So what is the first step in solving our housing crisis? And the first one, again, is a no-brainer. We build 30 to 40,000 homes under the Hawaiian Homes program. Now I know you're saying, well, what does that do? Well, number one, it's a controlled program. Can only be sold to Native Hawaiians, people living in Hawaii, which means values are going to be tied to incomes in Hawaii. So Hawaiian Homes is the perfect example of what needs to be done on the general market. But right now, let's just deal with Hawaiian Homes. So we want to build homes under Hawaiian Homes. We want to build as many as possible. Native Hawaiians will move out of their rental units. They'll move out of the homes they own now, and then those become available for other people to rent. So there is a benefit to everyone because immediately we should create housing opportunities. Again, Hawaiian Homes has been around for years, and they build about, on the average, 90 homes a year, which is crazy. We need to come in and build 30, 40,000. I know it's an election year, so they just got a ton of money, but again, the program they have is not going to work. The problem with Hawaiian Homes right now, and the reason it won't work, is they use an archaic lease concept. Back in the 50s, early 60s, the federal government came out and said, okay, Hawaii, if you want to keep leasehold, you need to get rid of the leases you're using. We cannot finance your leases because they do not create value for the lessee, the tenant. They create value for the landowner. So all of the lessors meant they went through this process and they came up with the lease we use today. And that lease creates value for the tenant, at least until the lease ends, because when it ends, you get nothing. But during the period of ownership, it created value. Everybody, every large estate agreed to use the modern lease except Hawaiian Homes. Hawaiian Homes still uses an archaic lease that gives you the value of owning the property, but doesn't let you use the value. Okay, so if you have a Bishop Estate lease, it might cost you $200,000 or $50,000 to buy it, and you buy it. But when you go to the bank, that $50,000 counts as your equity. And then you're able to build a house. You don't have to come up with a lot of money. What Hawaiian Homes does is they give the Native Hawaiian a lease that's worth $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 and says, here's your lease, 99 years, $1 a year, but you cannot use that value to borrow money. So now the Hawaiian family has to come up with a down payment of 20, 30%. Well, you know, who has $60,000, $100,000 in their account that is living in Hawaii? If you're a tenant or you're renting or just an average kind of guy, you don't have that kind of money. So a lot of Hawaiians, they get the lease, but they have no ability to build. The reason they can't build is Hawaiian Homes is using a lease that basically takes value away. Now realize, when you finance a lease, you do not lose the land. The land remains fee simple. The land will not be foreclosed on. They can only foreclose on the lease. And if they foreclose on the lease, they have to sell it to another native Hawaiian family. But if we would use a modern lease, we would actually create demand for Hawaiian home properties. We would solve the issues the lenders have about, well, we have to resell it to a native Hawaiian. And if you look at the reality, a lot of native Hawaiians cannot afford to buy. Okay. And again, it's because they should have been able to buy in the 30s, the 40s, and the 50s, but the program failed, and it's failed them since then. So building Hawaiian homes, but also modernizing their lease is important. Now, there's a number of other things in Hawaiian homes that has to be changed. One of them is they do not record at the Bureau of Conveyance. They should be required to record at the Bureau of Conveyance. Even if the state of Hawaii says it's free, you don't have to pay, we'll do it as reparations for all of the issues and money we owe you. The key is it should be recorded there because it makes the lenders happier. Everybody's sure of the title. They know what's happening. Right now, Hawaiian Homes does not record their documents with the Bureau. So again, there's a lot of uncertainty on the part of lenders. It requires Hawaiian Homes to guarantee every single loan. That's why they're inefficient. That's why they can't build. They can't do things faster. They can't buy more land. Absolutely no reason Hawaiian Homes could not build 20, 30, 40,000 homes in the next 10 years if they would change their structure a little bit, and if the state would fund the money that's needed. Now remember, we're helping the native Hawaiian, but it's really helping all of us because we're creating a local market. We're getting units that will become vacant that would be available to help our rentals, and other units that may be resold or their families may move into it. So again, we're stimulating the whole market. While this is going on, we can go to the second, third, and fourth step of our plan in terms of creating more affordable housing for everybody. But Hawaiian Homes is the fastest one because it already forces the buyer to be in a local market tied to local wages, local income, everything local. Mainland haoles can't buy, foreigners can't buy, local haoles can't buy. You got to be native Hawaiian. In fact, the program is such a great program, we should actually work on removing the 50% requirement and allow it to go down to whatever is acceptable to the Hawaiian community. Again, if we do that, the first step to me would be to honor anyone on the list. All the 50%ers get their house first. And if the government has to guarantee the loan or the government has to help them with the down payment because of the stupidity of the system they use right now or they don't want to change it, then that's the price we pay to save our market. Okay, so Hawaiian Homes becomes the first foundation for getting this done. And all we're doing is what we should have done 50 years ago. Get the Hawaiian people into ownership on their land. Now also realize if they change the lease, the 9,000 Hawaiians who are presently leasing have homes that are worth almost nothing. All of a sudden, they'll be worth more money. They'll be easier to refinance. Now the Hawaiians will have the money to send their kids to school, to buy an investment property, to start a business. They'll be treated like the rest of us. Right now they have value, but the value is only the house. So as the house ages, houses do not go up in value. Houses go down in value because they get older. Land goes up in value. I know the house I live in is probably worth $2 million, but the reality is the land is worth $2 million. The house is probably worth $100,000 or something because it's a 74-year-old house. I live in Ainahaina. So it's an older home. Okay, so most people buy in our neighborhood perfectly good homes. They tear them down. Nothing wrong with them other than they're dated, they're a little old, but very livable. So it tells you the value's in the land. For the native Hawaiian community, the land has no value. Their lease has no value because they cannot use that value because of a restriction in the lease. And the only value they have is the house. That's why when you look at a lot of native Hawaiian communities, you find the homes falling into disrepair because they want to go and borrow money to fix up the home. And then the bank is going to tell them, oh, but your house only appraised for $50,000. So, you got to put in more money. And we go back to cash. And if there's one thing the people of Hawaii are short on is cash. Because if we're living here, we're not saving money. We're living paycheck to paycheck. We're struggling to make the payments. We want to stay here. This is where we live. These are our people. This is our culture. And all of a sudden, we're sitting there going, wow, Vegas is a lot cheaper, right? The mainland is a lot cheaper. We are going to continue to lose population simply because we have failed to understand the problem and we have failed to look at the solutions. And this solution, number one, is everything I've said so far. And now we concentrate on building Hawaiian homes. It's the fastest, easiest way. It's a restricted market. And then we go to step number two. The next video will be step number two, and then we'll march forward from there with what has to be done to solve our housing crisis. Again, thank you for listening. If you missed the first two, I suggest you go back and listen, because it kind of all is a building block. And if you kind of understand, wouldn't hurt to listen to them once or twice, because I always don't explain things real clearly. Everything makes so much sense to me, but it doesn't necessarily mean it will make sense to you. So if you do have questions or concerns, please email. And I'm happy to try to work whatever the questions are into a presentation, or maybe we'll do a question answer session. But we've still got about 5 or 6 more steps before we actually get to solving the problem. Again, I want to remind everyone, we can, we will solve this problem if our politicians wake up and realize what they're doing is a failure, and it will continue to fail because they're not treating our market as an international market. They're treating our market like a local market. And all they're going to do is build more and more housing, attract more and more people, and prices will go up higher, and local people will get left behind. So please join me in getting educated, and join me in educating your politicians. Start asking them the embarrassing questions when they come by to see you, or if you're at a rally or something, and say, hey, do you believe this? Are you working on this? It's the only way we're going to change the structure we're in. I mean, our government is so entrenched, they're completely against new ideas. They're going to turn you away. You know, I have to tell you, at one public hearing I went to, and I told them, guys, you're doing things wrong. I have the solution. Here it is. And the head of the committee said, Mr. Savio, we don't care. We don't want to listen to you. And I said, really? But I'm testifying. He says, we don't care. So I said, fine. I got up and walked out. That's the mentality of our government today. It's not acceptable. You want change, you're going to have to demand it. Thanks again. I'll see you in the next video.